it's Wesley with 22 Zines, and welcome back to Zines for Greenhorns. We are up to part 3, which is talking about the setup for your zine. So I will go over some recommendations for supplies and choosing the size of your zine, and we will get to my number one greatest tip in the entire universe for setting up your master copy.
Hurry up.
Most of this video is going to be showing off examples on my desk, so I will turn the camera around. But before we do, I want to say that the absolute best supplies that you can get for your zine are the ones that you can get for free or steal from your job. So don't go buy supplies for your zine, really. Like, if there's something that you feel would genuinely make zine making feel a lot more approachable and or accessible for you, then go for it. But really, don't spend your money on supplies. Save your money to spend on photocopying later. All right, so first up are surfaces. My go-to zine making paper is 90-pound matte cardstock, which is about the weight of an index card. I use this for making my master copies before I photocopy them onto regular paper. I really like using the heavier paper for the master copy because it takes glue really well, it takes Sharpie or even paint, and it's just a little sturdier to work on instead of printer paper, and it's still really cheap. It's like $10 a ream, maybe, so I definitely highly recommend this. For the actual photocopying, I just use regular, standard, lightweight printer paper, and that is pretty much all you need. It takes ink pretty well. I use it for all of my copies of zines. As you can see here, it sort of shows the reverse side a little bit, but really not that much at all. And of course, it's perfectly easy to read. There is not a lot of bleed through. I think I use 20-pound paper usually. You can do 24 if you want it to be feel really nice. And of course, you can experiment with other types of paper anytime you want, but this is just kind of to prove that you do not need fancy paper. Don't worry about bleed through. It doesn't happen as much as you would think. You can, of course, use this for your master copies if you want to, and I've definitely done that before. Just note that it's probably going to warp a lot more. The paper is going to warp if you use a lot of glue onto it, and there will be some bleed through. I have a technique that means that you don't have to worry about bleed through at all. We'll get to that sort of towards the end here when we're talking about setting up your master copy. And of course, there's always notebook paper, just any type of different notebook paper. I really like using it because it has a pattern built into it, and it's still really easy to find, easily accessible. So these are basically just like little pieces of paper that I've ripped out of various random notebooks or things. Don't sleep on graph paper either. Graph paper is really cool, and it can make for, just to jazz up your patterns a little bit. If you have it or are so inclined to get some, you can use scrapbook paper as sort of a patterned background, or you can print your own patterned paper, basically. I don't usually, because this stuff is really expensive. I'll use it sometimes if I come across it, but I usually like to get patterned backgrounds from other places. So this is just like a block print pattern from some art book that was being recycled at my library. So, harvesting from books is a great place to find things, or magazines, of course. Also, if you want just some interesting patterns that you can get from anywhere, the back of letters just from junk mail or whatever have these really cool security patterns. I really like them, so that those can make good patterns. For mark making on the paper, a zine classic are Sharpies, or equivalent permanent markers. They are really popular, Zine Classic, because they are cheap, they are ubiquitous, and they are really high contrast, which means that they are going to photocopy very well and very readably. They are likely to bleed through on most paper, including the cardstock that I use, but I do have a technique for that. We'll talk about it later. For most purposes, any old pen is probably going to be fine. This just happens to be my personal favorite kind for writing, but, just whatever pen, a little Bic or one that you steal from work, doesn't matter. Cut off the chain at the bank to take their pens, whatever. As long as the ink or the writing is heavy enough for a photocopy to read it. As long as it'll photocopy relatively clearly, it's you're good to go on that one. On that note, pencil is tricky because it often doesn't show up well on your photocopies. A thin pencil line is almost invisible when copied. You can always edit the contrast with copier settings or in editing and post if you have the ability to do that, but especially for your first zine, it is easier just to make sure that your master copy is dark enough to be readable. If you have access to one, then a typewriter is also another zine classic. It's really fun, but I don't expect many of you have a typewriter, have access to one, which is totally fine. So try downloading some typewriter fonts and go to town. I will have a link to a whole bunch of free Creative Commons and or public domain typewriter fonts that are created from actual typewriters. Of course, if you have a printer or a photocopier, then you can print out whatever you want. So print wherever you can. Print at work, print at your parents' house, print at your local library. If you have your own printer, then do go ahead and print at home, but I recommend saving the really heavy ink stuff for when someone else is paying. And then you can use pretty much literally anything else. Anything that you can use to make a mark on paper, then you can use that in your zine, count that as supplies. I'm not even going to bother enumerating them because, like I said, biggest thing is use what you have access to. Don't go out and buy shit for this. Have I sworn in this yet? I did. Well, I did now. Cat's out of the bag. Alright, for binding your zine, the most common way of doing so is definitely staples. Your average stapler has a reach of about 4 inches to 10 centimeters. So unfortunately for many zines, that is a little bit short. It won't reach all the way across. 4 inches is about that. So for this reason, many zinesters will invest in a long arm or a saddle stitch stapler. A saddle stitch is sometimes called a booklet stitch. A booklet stapler. I personally prefer a saddle stitch to a long arm stapler because it takes up less space, it doesn't jam as often, it has a higher capacity much of the time, and it just looks cool. This is a saddle stitch stapler, and it works. Take your zine, pretend this is a finished zine, you open it up to the middle, you put it inside, sort of resting on this like a saddle, and then there you go, there's your staple. So I personally prefer a saddle stitch. It is slightly more expensive than a long arm stapler. They will probably hover around $30 US, and depending on where you live or what access you have, it might be harder for you to find this. A long arm stapler, which I'll show a picture. Basically, a long arm stapler, it's just a regular stapler, but it goes whoop, and it's really long. So those are probably going to be about $12. If you don't want to buy a stapler, then you can get a regular stapler, open it all the way flat, put something tough underneath your zine. So, open up your zine flat and then press into the tough plate, flip this over, and fold the metal bits of the staple in. It's a bit of a hassle if you want to do it that way. I don't recommend it. And, of course, you can't always just bind it like this. If you have a regular stapler and you don't want to invest in anything fancy, then you can just bind it from the side like this, and then just be aware when you open, there'll be a little bit of a margin. It won't lay all the way flat, which is fine. Just make sure that in your content of your zine, you don't have anything that goes too close to the middle that you want people to actually be able to see or read, because they just won't be able to. So that's staplers. You can also use thread for binding. One way of doing it is to basically just look up 3-hole pamphlet stitch binding and do, it's like a little figure 8 kind of binding with needle and thread. Or you can do what Nina of Echo Zines does and basically just take a thread and wrap it tightly around your zine. Where's the middle here? Yeah, so this is literally just a piece of thread wrapped around the zine, and that's the way that's bound. And it holds up perfectly fine. It's probably slightly less durable than staples, but, I've never had an issue with any of Nina's zines. So, that it's certainly an easy, accessible way to do it. You can do it just with regular yarn. And you don't have to worry about stapling at all. Other ways of binding, you could use brads or paper clips or binder clips or, I don't know, other type of clip things. I don't have an example for that one, but it's certainly an option. Or you can make your zine fold only. So basically you don't have any staples. It's just folded. The most common example of this is a mini zine. Mini zine, at least the way that I define it, it opens up like this. And it's basically folded in a way that you push it together, and then you can get 8 pages total plus the reverse side, which is kind of like a pull-out thing. There are other types of fold-only binding too. All types of fold-only binding are fine. They're great. You just will have to plan your pages a little bit farther out in advance. You'll probably have to know in advance how long you want your zine to be. So when we talk about zine sizes in a few minutes here, then we'll have a few more examples and you can see how that would work. Other supplies that will probably come in handy. A pair of scissors. Anything that is sharp and fits comfortably in your hands. Glue. I recommend against a wet glue like a white glue or a tacky glue because it'll warp and cockle your paper, making it a lot harder to get a smooth photocopy where you can easily see everything. So glue sticks, I find, are a lot better. It really doesn't matter what kind you use, as long as it'll hold up well enough for you to, long enough for you to get a scan or photocopy of it, then that's fine. I just use whatever I happen to have on hand. Elmer's, I typically buy woohoo. So yeah, either of those is fine. Or you could just use tape, regular Scotch tape. You could use double-sided tape. Just, why am I putting these aside? I got the scissors laying out here. I'll leave all these out here too. But yeah, just, tape's fine. A ruler will come in handy. I typically use these to make sure that an image or a collaged piece will actually fit on my page before I commit to cutting it out. I don't know if I've ever actually found much need for a straight line in zine making. If you have one or like using one, or if it would be useful for you, you could use a bone folder for assistance in folding. Essentially, when you get folding, even if it's just in half, then folding everything with your fingers can really be hard on your hand joints, and it can rub your skin raw, especially if you're making a whole bunch of copies. So some people use a bone folder where it's basically just like a plastic stick, or, you know, presumably it was made of bone at some point. Nowadays it's a plastic stick. I don't have one because here's a money-saving tip. I just use the back of a pair of scissors to crease the folds. There you go. Easy peasy. And this is the one thing that I put off buying forever, is a paper trimmer. And I will be 100% honest, it was purely out of stubbornness. I was like, I do not need to buy anything. I do not need to buy a paper trimmer. I will cut everything by hand. And then at some point, I just realized I am sitting here making like dozens of copies of these things at a time, hundreds sometimes. I can't do this with scissors anymore. So I have just a really cheapo, like less than $20 paper trimmer. And this is what I use for when I have a whole bunch of copies that need to be cut in some way. It's got this fold out thingy, and you can replace the little blade when it wears out. But really, you don't need one unless you are planning on making a whole bunch of copies, or, you know, when you get into things a little further. And of course, your office or your local library is likely to have a paper cutter or trimmer, so definitely ask, see if you can use that, or just stick with scissors. It's totally fine.
Hurry up.
All right, so now we're going to talk about some of the options that you have for different sizes of your zine. The content of your zine can inform your size, and the size can inform your content. That's why in the last video I encouraged you to have a basic idea of your content, just so that when you're looking at these sizes, you'll have a little bit of an inclination as to which size will work for your general concept. Yeah, but moving forward, we kind of got to get one of those nailed down, the size or the content. And so unless you specifically have a whole bunch of content that you already have and you're just trying to arrange it for print, then you'll probably want to pick the size of your zine first. Note that unless you're going for particular folding styles, which we'll talk about, you don't necessarily have to know what length your zine will be yet. There's a few general common standards that will be good to know as we go forward. Generally, when you are counting how many pages a zine has, the cover and back cover also count as pages. So the cover is really page 1, and then the interior page 2, and so on. Zines are made from a master copy, which is the thing that you're working directly onto, and then that master copy is scanned and or printed. And finally, the basic point of reference for paper size, when we're talking about like a sheet of paper, is a letter-sized or A4 piece of paper. I've split up zine sizes into two general categories. One is the standard sizes, and those are zines whose pages are sized based on a doubled number of folds from a complete piece of paper. You'll see what I mean here in a sec. And then the other is non-standard sizes, which is everything that doesn't fit into that category. So I have here an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, and we'll use this to sort of compare zine sizes. The first standard size that we'll talk about, we'll go in ascending order of size, is the mini zine. Some people use the word mini zine or mini slightly differently than I do. So I'm just simplifying it for the sake of this guide, and also because this is just how I conceptualize it. A mini zine is where a page of the mini zine is 1/8 of a full letter size sheet of paper. So much of the time, the 8 pages are all on one side of the unfolded piece of paper. So here is a mini zine that is spread out. As you can see, it's one piece of paper, and then it is folded in such a way that each page of the mini zine is 1/8 of the total size. This particular folding style doesn't require any staples or binding of any kind because it's entirely folded. Some mini zines also utilize the back to make basically like an unfolded flyer size, like that. And there's some variations on this size. You can alternatively use both sides of the piece of paper to make a 16-page zine, and then basically cut it in a different way so that you have 16 pages that are all this size, but it requires a binding like that, because you're basically utilizing both sides of the paper, but rather than unfolding it all the way up, you just cut it and then staple it together. So this would be a 16-page mini zine. Another option is that you can make a mini zine that has half of your pages on one side like this, that you then can open up and refold in the opposite direction to basically make it like two zines in one. So now we have the second half of the mini zine folded the other direction. But all of these types of mini zines are made with a single sheet of paper. And presumably there's nothing stopping you from making something that's this size and cutting it and assembling it so that you can make it any number of pages. It's just that the pages will have to be a multiple of 8 or 16 if you are using both sides of the zine. This is a quarter-size zine. Each page of the zine is 1/4 of the size of a full sheet of paper, and so each sheet that you have will make 8 pages. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then on the reverse side, 5, 6, 7, 8. This means that your total page count will be a multiple of 8. A quarter zine can also be done either in portrait or in landscape. So this would be in portrait, where the long side is vertical, and it looks like this when it's opened up. Or a zine can read in landscape mode, where it is longer and the long side is the horizontal. This is a half-size zine, where it is a single sheet of paper that's folded in half. So this is what it looks like this, but really makes more sense like this. Piece of paper folded in half. That means that each sheet of paper will provide 4 pages. And as a result, that means that the total number of pages in your zine will be a multiple of 4. And then we have the full-size zine, which has each page take up the total of a sheet of paper, as you can see. Same size. So there's 2 main ways to do this. One is to take a larger piece of paper, so a tabloid size page, it's 11 by 17 inches, or A3. Take this and fold it in half, basically like you would a half-size zine, and that would mean that your page count is a multiple of 4. Or you can have basically like a stack of double-sided letter pages and staple it on the side like this. So it opens up like this, but each of these copies is on a single letter size page, and that would mean that your zine would have a page count that is a multiple of 2, which makes sense. 1, 2. So those are all of our standard sizes, and now we'll get into the non-standard sizes. First would be other whole ratios. So in this category, I would put zines that are made using a full sheet of paper that's cut into equal sizes with no leftover, but just ones that you don't necessarily see as often or in different ratios. So for example, while a quarter size, I can pull that back out here, a quarter size is made by cutting a page in half and folding. You could cut a page into thirds or fourths and fold, and that would be a whole ratio, but a non-standard size. So this is my example. This zine, I'll see if I can show it off. You have 1, 2, 3. So it's a little bit awkward, but basically you have 1, 2, 3, and no space left over on the page. So this would be a whole ratio, non-standard size zine. Hopefully that makes sense. And then just as you would have a whole ratio non-standard size, you could have a non-whole ratio. So basically this is a zine where it's the same as above. You cut from this piece of paper, but it would leave you with some bit left over that you would have to trim off so it doesn't use the entire page. So as you can see here, we got 2 copies of the zine, and then it leaves some extra at the top. If we sort of open it up this way, we can see it like that. It leaves this top off where you don't have enough room to make another one, but instead you have this blank space that you'd have to trim. If you are really savvy, you can plan a second zine to be printed on the leftover papers and basically get 2 zines out of your sheets. It can be a little tricky / annoying, but it can be done, and that's what I have done with this one. So I have this bonus zine that is made out of the leftover paper. I think it makes a little more sense, actually, if I show you an unfolded one. So here we have 1 copy of this zine and 1 copy of the bonus zine on a single sheet of paper. Non-whole ratios can be really fun, in particular if you are wanting to cut your zine to a specific size for a thematic purpose. So if you wanted to cut your zine to the size of a CD case, or I've done the same aspect ratio as used in tarot cards for tarot zines. Like, it's just kind of a cool thematic thing that you could do if you wanted. Next up, there's some alternative folds, and basically there's a lot of ways to fold your zine, including ways that don't require staples or binding. Most of the time these will require slightly more planning, but they can be cool. So here's a few examples. This one's just kind of a mock-up because I don't I don't have a zine that fits this category, but for example, this sample zine is a, let me get this as sort of a comparison. This is a quarter-size zine, as you can see here. But it is folded from a larger piece of paper, from a tabloid A3 piece of paper, as one would a mini zine. So it's the same folding, it doesn't require any binding. This is just because I didn't have any tabloid, but, you know, ignore the yellow. It doesn't require any binding. Fold it like you would a mini zine, and there you go. You have a zine that is a quarter size with no binding. That's one example. Another example is that you could use a piece of paper to make basically like a little pocket, and then have loose leaf pages, or bounds, they don't have to be loose leaf, on the inside like this. So if we sort of deconstruct this a little, you can see this is a half letter size piece of paper, and then these are quarter size pieces of paper. So, you know, again, you plan to fold this bit, but it uses up the entire piece of paper, or you could do things that don't use the entire piece of paper. That's totally fine too. You could do a zine that is folded that basically just unfolds to reveal the zine. So the zine itself it's kind of like a flyer. It's just printed on regular piece of paper and then folded up in one way or another just to make it easier to carry, and you put the title on one side and there you go. You could do a brochure style fold. This is each page. It's weird to say page for these sometimes, but basically it's a quarter size zine that folds out, has these pages, and then on the inside it has long pages, so it looks like a brochure. Or another option for a brochure style fold is this one. This is one of mine. It was out of a big tabloid / A3 piece of paper, and just folds up like this. And so each page is a quarter lengthwise, a quarter vertically, oh my god, a quarter vertically of a tabloid piece of paper, or relative to a letter size, that's a half of a letter folded this way. The point of all these is that there's a whole bunch of different ways that you could fold. There's alternative folds, and those are just a few ideas that you could use. You can also do what I am referring to as an origami zine, which is, it's basically an alternate fold, but a little bit more complex. I'm kind of putting it in its own section to point out that you can go really crazy. Like anything that you can print flat and fold into something could become a zine. So you could do an origami envelope, or a cootie catcher, or this example, which is so cool. This is called a flexagon, or also known as an infinite flipper. So it's this hexagon shape, and then if you sort of refold it in a different way, suddenly you have another page. So it's basically like a three-sided hexagon zine. Let me hang on, I gotta get it back the other way. There we go. A three-sided flexagon, three-sided page zine. The point is, you can go really nuts with this if you want to. I've seen some really cool zines out there like this one. I don't have a printed example of this one, but I have seen it before. You can do some really fancy trimming on things if you are willing to spend a little bit more time on assembly. So, you could cut the sides into a pattern or something like that. You could try cutouts or Dutch doors in between pages. It does take more effort for each individual copy that you're printing, but could be pretty cool. Dana of Cat Moth Crow cut a zine in the shape of her cat's face. And finally, you could do a zine within a zine. Some zinesters will include a mini zine within the larger zine. You could do it as a pull out and fold. You could slip it in with a folder or a belly band or a paper clip. You can make a secret pocket with a larger piece of paper, kind of like we were showing with the with this version. You can have like one piece of paper be larger than the rest of yours, fold it up. There you go, secret pocket. You could just glue it or attach it straight on the page of a larger zine. The many, many possibilities for ways to include a zine within a zine. When picking a size, my primary consideration is how much page space I will need. Personally, I am a fan of the half size because it leaves you a lot of room to play on for different sizes of things, different collages, having different sections, that kind of thing. It doesn't require any trimming, and it's relatively easy to arrange. We will have a section on arranging your pages for print in the next video. Mini zines are really popular for first-timers because there's not too many pages to get overwhelmed with. It is single-sided printing, so it's relatively easy to arrange. And they are interesting and fun to fold. You get to do that cool, open it up, push together, and it's like, ooh, I'm making a star, a zine star. So they're also a popular choice for first timers. Just note that if you're working with a mini zine, especially the folded kind like this, you pretty much have to stick to those 8 little pages exactly, because there's not a very easy way to add more pages unless you're going to cut them out separately and staple them in, at which point, you could kind of do that for any size of zine. I like to decide whether my zine is going to be in black and white or in color before I start making pages. And mostly that's because it influences the way I create. If I start in black and white and then decide later that I want it in color, I kind of just have to redo all my pages. So you might think that maybe it's a good idea to always create in color, because that way you could print either in color or in black and white. But I would caution against that. I think it is a better idea. I shouldn't say better. I prefer to make the decision in advance of whether I plan to have it in color or in black and white. Because color saturation can throw off your perception of contrast on the page. So taking a color thing and turning it into black and white can give you some problems with the colors turning really washed out or sometimes hard to read due to there being low contrast. So here is an example. For one, just heads up, I had to edit this black and white version a lot to make it readable, basically adjust the contrast settings and everything on my computer in post when I'm printing it, or you could do it on the copier itself. But I have this as sort of an example. This is what it looks like in color, and this is what it looks like in black and white, where you don't really get to see the pattern of dots there, hardly at all compared to this one. And the pink is very washed out. It's just hardly even there. And, it just looks kind of weird and washed out. Here's another example with a few more colors. Here is the difference in color and in black and white, where the difference between the cyan, magenta, and the yellow, it's significantly less difference. You can't even really see this yellow surrounding it in the way that you can with color. Here it is printed like this. So the point is, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, unless you're writing text in color and you want that text to be legible, then you really have to think about it. But, it's not a bad thing for something to look washed out. It just, whatever you make in color will not look the same in black and white. And so if you have a specific look that you are going for, then I recommend making your decision now in your setup phase of whether you want to be creating in color or in black and white from the beginning. In making that decision, the main consideration for me of choosing black and white versus color is the price. Color printing is almost always at least 3 to 10 times more expensive per page than black and white. And so unless it's really central to the feel of the zine that I'm going for, or I just really want to do color and utilize it fully, then I don't have money for that. I'm not going to do that. So there's nothing wrong with zines that are printed in black and white. I really love black and white zines, but if you are feeling bored or limited by black and white, then I have a few ideas for ways that you can make it more interesting that don't require paying to print your entire zine in color. One simple example is that you could just print your black and white zine on colored paper. And colored paper is usually more expensive than white paper, slightly more expensive, but way, way cheaper than printing in colored ink. And it, adds a little flavor to it. You can even do each individual sheet in a different color. Just remember to separate your pages by color to make it easier to print that way. You could make a color cover and have the cover of your zine only be in color and then have the rest of it be in black and white. You could do color on an interior page too if you wanted to. As a nice little surprise, you could do a pull-out poster that's in color. You could decorate the copies that you have after it's been printed. It would require a little bit more effort per individual zine, but could be fun. You could use stickers or washi tape or markers or highlighters to add color after it's been photocopied. This one actually wasn't photocopied. I'm just kind of using it as an example. You could get some of those little star stickers that they use for teachers of oh, good job on that. Just stick them everywhere. Spice up the individual copies that way. You can use really high contrast patterns and images and text to jazz up a page. So here's an example where each of these photos the contrast is up so that it doesn't look super washed out. It looks like it was sort of intentionally done in black and white. This is just purely black and white, but it's done in this cutout style, so it's super high contrast, makes it kind of interesting. It just makes each individual page pop a little bit by using this really high contrast. And if you are printing anywhere but your house, then take advantage of the fact that places don't change the copy price based on how much ink your page has. You can do white on black instead of black on white. You can use a whole lot of black in your zine, and in general, that will cost the same amount as if you used a lot of white in your zine. So this can sort of give it a little punch.
Hurry up.
Okay, so we've finally gotten to setting up your master copy. And this tip is honestly the number one reason I wanted to make this entire guide to begin with. This is my absolute best, number one, save my ass, best ever tip that I can give you for making your zine making journey simpler, for simplifying your zine making. And that tip is to save arranging for print until later. Instead, when you are in the creation process and doing your master copy, cut individual pages out of your master copy paper to size for each page, and then work single-sided directly onto those pages. So, for an example, if I were to do a half-size zine, I take this cardstock, which, like I mentioned earlier, I like to use as my base, and I cut it out single-sided. I work on one side just directly onto these pieces of paper, and then later, when I have it done, that is when I do the arranging for print. So you can see each one of these is actually single-sided, and I've just kind of taped them together in the way that they will print correctly. We'll get into all that. I'll do imposing for print and all that, but point is, I work single-sided onto each of these, and then there you go. It makes working so much easier because of a lot of things. One, you don't have to worry about bleed through. As you can see on this page, I used this pen that ended up bleeding through, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't bleed through to the reverse side because I'm working single-sided, and then I tape them together later. You also don't need to know exactly how many pages your zine is going to be before you start creating if you do it this way, most of the time, unless you're doing a specific folding technique. And you don't have to know how many pages a certain section will be. So if you get the inspiration to add in another picture or add another paragraph, you don't have to worry about trying to find space on a single page for it. You can just add another page, and there you go. It's really easy. You also can rearrange your pages as much as you see fit. So some of these, were not necessarily created in sequential order, but they got rearranged just based on the way that I wanted to arrange them. They are so much easier to work on and store because you can just make them one at a time, and then it takes up half the space. They don't flop around. You just easier to work on, easier to store. You won't damage content in case your paper warps, or if you change your mind on something, or if you feel like you've made a mistake that you would really like to change, then you don't have to worry about, oh, well, now I have to also redo the page on the other side. It's like, no, because it's single-sided, so you can just, get rid of one of the pages and then make it again and then arrange it later. I mean, this really is so much easier, I think. And I've done zines many ways. I've also done zines that are actually on a single piece of paper and done double-sided like that without this technique. And it just makes it makes the creation process so much harder and more complicated than just if I have individual pages and then I can deal with it later. So that is my big piece of tip. That's my big tip. The only time that I don't bother cutting out individual pages and using this method is if I am doing a mini zine. because in that case, I'm pretty much only working on one side of it anyway, and it's just one single sheet of paper, so I just draw or fold the pages in advance, and then just kind of work directly onto a single sheet. But for pretty much everything else, highly, highly recommend, I cannot emphasize this enough, do your pages individually. It makes things so much easier. So in order to do this, what I will usually do is cut the number of individual pages close to the number of pages that I think that I'll need. And then as I'm creating, I can add or subtract as needed. And then once I'm nearing the end of the content that I want to make, once I'm starting to feel like, okay, I know what else I want to have in here, it's a little bit more solid, that's when I will go through my pages and make sure that the total number of pages that I have is the right number of multiples based on the size of the zine. So, for example, when I was saying that a half-size zine, your total number of pages will be a multiple of 4. Then I will go through this stack of single-sided things, and I will count them, and I'll make sure that's a multiple of 4. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 is a multiple of 4. So now I know that when I go to impose this for printing, I won't have any empty pages. Then I will go through and I will arrange the pages in the order that I want them to be read, and I will go ahead and finish the pages. And then once I have the order and the page count set, that is when I will arrange them for print, which, like I said, we will get to in the next video. You can even use this method if you are working digitally, such as with a text-based zine. You can set up a grid on your word processor and give a little bit of padding for each cell. There are a number of ways of doing this. One that's pretty universal is inserting a table and then manually adjusting the row and column sizes so that each cell is the same size as one page. And then when you print it, the grid lines will show you exactly where to cut, and you can arrange for print manually just like you would in this example. So that's handy also anytime that you have a text-heavy page to make sure that your text won't go over the page, or if you are trying to make sure, okay, I want to make sure that this particular page has enough room for what I am doing, you can basically use this method as like a sizer before you print. Very convenient. Hurry up. That is about it for part 3. The next step is going to be advice on printing. So that will involve setting up your pages, imposing them for print, and general advice for photocopying, printing, and that sort of thing. So in between this video and the printing video, then go to town, do your creation, start making your zine, get your pages set up, and then you'll be all ready to go for learning about printing and photocopying. So, hope to see you then. Have some fun making your zine. Bye-bye.